this presentation, and also all of you to attend. So just to introduce myself, I'm Kieren Nolan. I'm a senior lecturer at the School of Chemical Sciences and also head of school there. And one aspect of my research program is the development of new materials, novel materials for wastewater treatment. So just to give you some background, School of Chemical Sciences, and also I'd like to discuss the DCU Water Institute, which many of us here actually are heavily involved in. I mean, first of all, obviously water issues, as you saw in the previous presentation, are massive. And the DCU Water Institute was set up in order to basically develop new technologies, new policy, etc. For here in Ireland and Europe with issues concerning water technologies and quality, etc. And to move on, I suppose, in terms of our capabilities at DCU, in terms of what we have to offer, is basically, well, I suppose one thing I'll mention is graduates, which are essential. We have quite a few different people, students being educated within the DCU Water Institute, and this is fantastic because now we're generating a new generation of young people who are expertise in the area, go into industry, government, etc., and will affect policy development and also information technology concerning water issues. I suppose at DCU we have quite a lot to offer, in particular advanced analytical separation methods, sensor developments, which are all essential, data analytics and imaging processes. There's some exceptional research being done presently at the Water Institute. Autonomous sensing technologies, also nano water technologies, which is I'm going to touch on a little bit here in my own presentation, and membrane technology, also core and water purification and separation. So we have a lot of capabilities there, a combination of not only chemists, biologists, but we have engineers, mathematicians, and also people in communications. So we're very well set up all around as an institute with respect to the Water Institute, with respect to both technological development and also policy development. So I suppose I'll just get into some of the technologies my group and other groups that I'll be mentioning along the way have been involved in, involving wastewater treatment. Now, obviously most of you are familiar with standard water treatments, and our target actually is industrial wastewater streams, not necessarily larger water works. And in terms of water treatment, usually standard methods are used in industrial wastewater streams. However, even after biological treatment, etc., there's an awful lot of molecules, especially pharmaceuticals, which can survive that treatment and are actually released into the environment, which is becoming a big problem with new EPA regulations in Europe. So now this industry is quite interested in developing technologies, efficient technologies, cheap, that can actually remove or at least lower the concentration of these culprit compounds down before they're released into the environment. So obviously there's, in terms of water treatment, we have physical membrane filtration separations, reverse osmosis possibles. The problem, of course, with these is energy. Energy can be a problem, but they are highly effective. There's also a ion exchange resin, but again, there's large mass waste considerations, etc. Activated carbon, which is one of the standards for polishing water, but again, you do have waste. Once activated carbon becomes saturated, it becomes organic waste and has to be disposed or reactivated, which can be a high energy process in itself. In terms of chemical treatment, you have the standard chlorination, but we all know what can happen there in terms of chlorination of compounds into more potentially cytotoxic compounds. Ozonation is also quite effective. It does require some energy, but sometimes only gives partial oxidation of compounds. Ultraviolet disinfection is used presently in most modern works, and it's there, and it's great that that technology is there because I'll be talking about that. Hydrogen peroxide disinfection, but again, it's a reagent that has to be added in. And what I'm going to be talking about is photocatalysis. It kind of ties in, obviously, with ultraviolet light, which already exists within the industry. And it's related to hydrogen peroxide disinfection because what you generate for photocatalysis is very similar to what's generated with peroxide in terms of degradation. Now, I suppose the material that has sort of won out in terms of photooxidative process is titanium dioxide. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on titanium dioxide here, but just the fact that it's an inert material, but in the presence of UV light, it gets activated and it is capable of converting water or hydroxide in solution into hydroxide radicals. That's the key. It's probably hydroxide radical is your most powerful oxidant in water solution, far more powerful than chlorine, perchlorates, bleach, etc. So when it comes in contact, as you generate hydroxide radical, and it comes in contact with an organic molecule, it simply oxidizes it to CO2, and if any elements such as nitrogen are present, nitrates, and of course water. That's ideal. We refer to that as complete mineralization. And again, requires UV light, which some would argue is a shortcoming. However, it still is quite effective. Now, photocatalysis, TiO2, is commonly used in so many formulations from toothpaste, paint, etc. So it's a pretty inert material. And one of the problems, I suppose, with TiO2 that we typically, and it's used in photocatalysis, is that it's a nanoparticle material, and that's a problem if it gets into the environment. It can coat lake beds, and it has done that before with riverbeds. So the nanoparticle aspect is a problem, and to isolate nanoparticles out of the system is difficult. It adds a new challenge within the industry. And over the years, we've looked at different forms of TiO2. We've modified TiO2. We've actually looked at visible light-activated TiO2. However, we find that good old-fashioned TiO2 is the best in terms of complete mineralization. So problems with TiO2, as I mentioned, nanoparticles. Removal is a major problem. You don't want it leach into the environment, and only the UV region is used. We've looked at other modified forms of it. UV is the best. We have dye-modified TiO2 particles, etc., which do function in the visible region, but unfortunately they're only partial oxidants in most cases, and their multi-recycling is a problem, so not necessarily ideal. However, we moved into the idea of integrated photocatalytic absorbance, that's IPCA. This is where, as I mentioned before, activated carbon is a great absorption. However, there's an organic waste problem. So the theory behind this concept is the immobilization of TiO2 onto activated carbon. So in essence, it absorbs out the pollutants, localizing it on the surface. There will be mass transfer. If you irradiate with UV light, that pollutant gets destroyed, and in essence, you're regenerating or keeping your activated carbon fresh. So that's the idea behind IPCAs. And over the years, we've done some extensive work in this area, myself, Ann Morrissey, John Tobin, and we found that actually IPCAs are quite effective with pharmaceuticals. We also targeted pesticides. Pesticides, chlorinated especially, were quite ineffective. We found that about 90% of pharmaceuticals function quite well with these IPCAs, and they can be regenerated. So it's a fairly effective technology. The only problem, of course, is that if you have a bed of activated or carbon, IPCA carbon, it's light penetration. So that is one of the weaknesses of the technology. In the meantime, obviously, we're research chemists, and we're interested in materials carbonaceous, and our attention turned, obviously, with the bandwagon on graphene. Graphene, and it's graphene oxide in particular. The functionalized surface of graphene oxide is very similar to activated carbon. So we started to look at comparisons between activated carbon and graphene. And here you see an image of graphene, nice spongy material. Now this is non-pristine graphene, it's not electronic type graphene. This is the cheap material that we prepare. Now the problem, I suppose, with graphene is the synthesis of it. It's not very green, unfortunately. However, we did explore the material, and again, we had different forms, graphene paper, but what we found most effective is graphene sponge. It dissociates once it hits into water, it just disintegrates very nicely, and is a pretty effective absorption system. Now, in terms of, I'm sorry, I went the wrong way there. In terms of actual absorption properties, what we found is quite fascinating. Now, one of the parts of the preparation of graphene is acidic treatment toward the end. And what we found with a lot of pharmaceuticals that contain carboxylic acid groups, or that exist as the anionic salt of the carboxy groups, these compounds precipitated in the presence. So it had a fantastic absorption capacity for these compounds, removing it. Now, most other compounds absorbed out, and there wasn't really any improvement versus activated carbon, except that the kinetics was a little bit faster with graphene. So in terms of certain carboxy compounds like diclofenac, and that's what you're looking at here, is diclofenac, the anti-inflammatory non-steroidal, which is also a problematic compound in the environment. It crystallizes out of solution. An analog or a similar compound with a similar pKa, not a similar compound, ibuprofen, also crystallizes under these type of conditions. And we now understand the mechanism of crystallization, etc. However, being also photochemists, we were interested in looking at, can these things act as IPCAs, as we saw before, and does graphene bring anything to the actual table in terms of enhancement, especially visible light catalysis, given the planar sheets aromaticity of graphene offers. And here you're seeing a whole series of different composites, and what we're looking at here are graphene titanium dioxide composites. And we've created methodologies of basically a mobilization of standard nanoparticles to the synthesis of nanoparticles of titanium dioxide off the surface of graphene, all the way to nanotube. These here are titanium nanotubes on graphene surfaces. And we investigated, of course, their photocatalytic performance against usual standard pharmaceuticals. Just to mention, here's a standard photoreactor that we typically use. And what we found is, yes, that the nanoparticles, in particular, the synthesized nanoparticles from sol gel methods, titanium isopropoxide, produce the best results in terms of UV photocatalysis. But what was really fascinating is that the nanotube structures actually are also visible active. They have a weak visible activity, so they do work under visible light in the absence of UV, which is quite interesting. Now, since then, and I haven't shown it here, is we set up a collaboration. One of the problems, I suppose, if you look at these are irregular particles that we're making. We have a colleague in India who can actually selectively make lengths, diameters very nicely, and we're now exploring that, and also modifying them chemically in terms of dye modifications, etc. However, and I think Breed here, who's here also will be presenting next, one of the exciting things is we moved away from photocatalysis with graphene and looked at other various composites. And what we're looking at here would be a filtration system. The idea behind the filtration system obviously is to absorb out organic molecules, but one of the key problems, I suppose, in any filtration system is bacterial activity on the filters, such as an activated carbon. And what you're looking at here is a graphene composite material that actually is quite effective in absorption capacity with pharmaceuticals and has anti-biological activity or microbiocidal activity, so you're not having bugs growing on it. And we're now in the process, actually we do have a prototype, which isn't shown here, but we have a prototype that we're presently testing that could be actually used in small water schemes. And this was funded by the Environmental Protection Agency, myself and Breed, Ann Morrissey, and Jenny Lawler. Now, another interesting thing about some of these composites here, we've also applied them with Jenny Lawler in membrane technologies, ultrafiltration, to basically self-clean membranes, etc., and it's working out quite nicely. And we've also been able to suspend graphene into polymer matrices also for membrane applications. That is also working quite effectively in terms of photoremediation and absorption. So I guess in conclusion, TiO2 works very well in UV light. It's a fantastic disinfectant. Now we are working with a couple of companies, and I suppose one of the problems with TiO2, if there is going obviously to real waste and also concentration. It's very effective at low concentrations of removal. As you go to high concentrations, we're having a challenge right now in terms of what I would call high organic waste, content waste. So we're presently working on that, trying to develop some approaches, both light technology approaches, etc., to overcome this problem. IPCAs with TiO2, they do work. They're quite effective across a large range of pharmaceuticals. Not so good with the chlorinated pesticides, but fairly effective for any pharmaceutical manufacturer. Whether they really will ever be used, it's hard to say because of the problem I mentioned before in terms of packed beds and light penetration. Graphene TiO2, academically, very interesting in terms of absorption. We have some crystallization. Unique polymorphs can be made from the crystallization, and it has interesting photochemical properties. However, it's the other graphene composites that are looking very promising in terms of dark filtrations and in terms of the filter system that I just showed you, and also in membrane technologies in terms of self-cleaning. And I think that basically brings me to the end. I just want to thank, first of all, the team. There's a lot of people involved, myself and Ann Morrissey, and in particular Breed Quilty, who will also be talking next, Jenny Lawler and John Tobin, who kind of got me into this area. And of course on the graphene, the students that worked on it, Declan McGlade recently, and Dr. Zara Golovand, who basically got us into the graphene area about 3-4 years ago. And on the TiO2, Sharon Murphy, Ross O'Dwyer, David Keane, and Anne-Marie Deegan, in terms of the work with TiO2 and also IPCAs. And I'd just like to thank you for your attention.